My name is Florence. I'm 42 years old. And this is the story of how my husband announced he was selling our house for his mistress, and how I handed him an envelope that changed everything. I had been up since 5 a.m. that Thanksgiving morning, not because anyone expected me to be, but because I wanted this year to be perfect. I wanted the food to taste like love. The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey swirled through our house, wrapping itself around the memories I had spent almost 2 decades building. I was at the kitchen counter, apron on, slicing pumpkin pie while rain tapped gently on the porch roof like a ticking clock I couldn't silence. Behind me, my husband Matthew's phone rang for the 6th time. He didn't even flinch anymore when it buzzed. He stood by the dining table with his back turned to me, eyes fixed on the glowing screen, smiling in that way he hadn't smiled at me in years. It wasn't a smile meant for a wife. I wiped my hands on the dish towel and turned to him. "Matthew, can you help me put the potato tray in the oven?" I asked gently. "Just a minute," he muttered without looking up, his fingers dancing on the screen like he was casting a spell that had nothing to do with this home or this holiday. I gripped the dish towel tighter, biting back the bitterness that threatened to rise in my throat. 19 years of hosting, cleaning, cooking, and this year, I felt invisible. But not weak. The ache in my chest had been growing quietly for months, an unspoken truth I had learned to swallow with my coffee. At 11:30 a.m. sharp, our kids arrived. Emma came in from Oregon, her eyes tired but sparkling with excitement. Lucas flew in from New York and wrapped me in a bear hug, whispering, "The house still smells like the best place in the world, Mom." His words warmed something in me that had long been numb. The table was beautiful. Candles flickered softly. I had brought out the delicate blush pink china and folded the linen napkins into little swans. My heart was full even if Matthew's silence pierced it. He said nothing. No compliment, no thanks. Just another text sent behind a crooked smile. And then, after the wine was poured and the laughter filled the room, he stood up. "I have something I need to announce." His voice was cold. Calculated. The room felt quiet like the moment before a storm. Emma froze with her fork mid-air. Lucas narrowed his eyes. "I've decided to sell this house," Matthew said flatly. "Jennifer and her kids need more space. Kayla just turned 4. The twins are starting 1st grade. Her apartment's too small." There was a moment of silence so thick it pressed against my ears. Lucas shot up from his seat. "What did you just say?" I didn't move. Didn't speak. I watched the man I had shared nearly 2 decades of my life with casually hand over our home to another woman like it was just a transaction. Jennifer. The woman I had heard about in passing for months. The woman who needed emotional support. The one with kids and problems and a soft voice over speakerphone. Matthew rambled on about schools and backyards like we weren't even there. Like I was a ghost sitting at my own dinner table. I stood slowly. Calm. Measured. Like I had done every step of my life since March, the night everything started to fall apart. Without a word, I walked into the kitchen and opened the 3rd drawer. Inside was the envelope I had hidden 3 weeks ago. Thick with carefully collected truths. Returning to the table, I placed it beside his wine glass, next to the gravy stain he hadn't noticed. "If today is a day for announcements," I said quietly, "then I have something too." He stared at the envelope like it might explode. "What is this?" he asked. I smiled, soft and cold. "A gift. For your clarity." And then I sat back down and cut another bite of sweet potato pie, chewing slowly. The room was dead silent. Emma leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, how long have you known?" I didn't look at her. I didn't look at anyone. Long enough. And that's where it really began. Because Matthew wasn't the only one who had been making plans. The first time I suspected Matthew was cheating was back in March, on a night that felt too quiet for a city like Chicago. The rain had started early, drumming against the windows like it was trying to warn me. I was curled up on the living room couch waiting for him. He had said he'd be home by 9, maybe 10 at the latest, team meeting, client dinner, the usual script. But it was nearly midnight when I heard the front door click open. His hair was freshly combed. Not a strand out of place. His coat looked like it had barely faced the elements. And he didn't smell like steak or wine or anything that hinted at a late-night work dinner. "Meeting ran long," he said, dropping his briefcase like he always did. "Sorry, I didn't mean to worry you." But I wasn't worried. I was watching. I had reheated lasagna 3 times that night, trying to tell myself I was imagining things. That he was just tired. That work was stressful. That I was overthinking it all. But then the late nights became frequent. The excuses, too clean. The smiles, too rehearsed. And then came Jennifer M. Marketing. I saw her name pop up on his screen one night in April while I was washing dishes. I glanced over just in time to catch her name before he silenced the call. "Don't call right now. She's home." That's what he typed. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream or throw his phone into the sink like part of me wanted to. I simply rinsed the plate in my hand and filed the name away. Jennifer Marks. After that, it was like I couldn't not see her. She was everywhere. Matthew mentioned her during dinner, her marketing ideas, her brilliant instincts, how she had a rough divorce and was trying to rebuild her life. Rebuild her life using mine, apparently. Then one weekend in May, I caught a glimpse of a photo on his phone as he napped on the couch. He'd left it face up on the coffee table, the screen lighting up just enough to show a picture. It was Matthew, tying a little boy's shoelaces at a park. A woman stood beside him, arms around a young girl, her smile stretched wide across her face. I knew that gray t-shirt. I had folded it the day before. He told me he was at a basketball game with Lucas that day. But Lucas had stayed home, sick. We had watched a movie together, both confused when Matthew didn't check in even once. That photo unraveled everything. Still, I said nothing. Because something deeper inside me, colder, quieter, had started to awaken. I didn't want to confront Matthew. I wanted to confirm him. I wanted proof. I opened my laptop and started looking. Jennifer Marks. Recently divorced. Lives in the northern suburbs. 3 kids. Works in marketing. Her Instagram was a garden of happy lies. Children with matching outfits. A tidy townhouse. And in the background of one photo, just a blur, a man I knew by heart. Matthew's build. Matthew's watch. Matthew's life. A life I never knew he had. In June, Emma mentioned something while stirring coffee during her summer break. "I saw Dad a few weeks ago, downtown," she said. "He was walking with someone and 3 little kids. I didn't think anything of it at first, but I don't know. They looked like a family." That was it. The last piece of the puzzle. He wasn't just cheating. He was replacing us. That week, I began printing. Bank statements. Receipts. Pay stubs. His credit card history. It told a better story than he ever could. Thousands spent at a boutique toy store. A children's shoe shop. A preschool. A cupcake shop he once said was too far for me to try. I knew every detail of our budget. I handled the finances meticulously for years. So I knew which transactions didn't make sense. And then came the power bill. Late payment notice. The first one in nearly 20 years. I called the company, thinking it was an error. But no. Matthew hadn't paid it. And yet, he'd spent nearly $2,000 that same week on a new children's bedroom set from an interior design firm in Lincoln Park. That's when I went there. I walked into the office of that firm pretending to be a potential client. I asked to see examples of their recent work. I showed the receptionist a photo of Matthew and asked if he had worked with them. Oh, him? Yes. That was for Ms. Marks and her boyfriend. They just finished decorating the kids' room last month. So sweet. Sweet. I clenched my teeth all the way home. That night, I went to the closet and pulled out the receipts from his blazers. The ones he always tucked away like forgotten candy wrappers. I found a receipt from a birthday party store. It read, "Happy 5th birthday, Elise." Pink frosting. Sprinkles. Not my daughter. Not my family. I sealed everything in a thick white envelope and wrote Matthew across the front. No last name. No address. Just his first name, in the same script I once used to sign anniversary cards. And then, I hired a lawyer. Gregory Palmer was in his early 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much heartbreak to be easily rattled. He flipped through the documents I brought him, slowly nodding. "You've done our job for us," he said. "Most women take months just to gather this much." I didn't want to react, I said. I wanted to protect this house. My kids. Myself. We started proceedings quietly. Every Tuesday, I visited his office under my maiden name. No emails. No texts. Only handwritten correspondence, sealed and mailed. I moved with purpose, like someone sewing shut a wound too deep for stitches. By October, the house was legally mine. Matthew didn't know. He still thought I was the woman too tired to ask questions, too weak to push back. The same woman who'd bake pies and light candles while he threw away everything we'd built. But I was already gone. He just hadn't noticed yet. October rolled in with amber leaves and colder winds, but inside my chest was a calm I hadn't felt in years. Not numbness, clarity. While Matthew rehearsed his new life with Jennifer and her children, I finalized every legal form Gregory Palmer placed in front of me. The house we lived in, the one he planned to gift to his mistress, was now legally mine. Quietly. Strategically. Permanently. Matthew still moved through our home like a king, still dropped his shoes by the door, left his mug unwashed, ignored my voice at dinner. But his throne was made of paper now, and I held the match. One evening, he came home whistling. That annoyed me more than anything else, the audacity of his joy. He pulled off his coat, smiled down at his phone, and said with no shame, "I think it's time we redo the living room, don't you? Something more modern. I want this place ready by the new year." I looked up from my book and answered simply, "It's not your place to redesign anymore." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Florence, let's not be difficult." I smiled back. "Oh, I'm not." I was ready. That Thanksgiving dinner, when he stood and made his grand announcement, I expected every word. What I didn't expect was how calm I'd feel. He looked proud when he said Jennifer's name, spoke about her kids like they were his own, declared our home was going to be better used by someone who needed it. My fingers itched to throw the wine in his face. But I didn't. I just reached for the envelope and placed it beside his plate. It didn't even shake in my hand. And that's the difference between someone broken and someone who's done breaking. Matthew didn't touch the envelope that night. He ate nothing after his speech. Couldn't seem to meet anyone's eyes. Emma looked like she might cry. Lucas looked like he might kill him. I stayed seated. I finished my pie. I didn't need to make a scene. The papers inside the envelope would speak louder than I ever could. That night, as I cleaned the kitchen alone, I heard him pacing downstairs. He picked up the envelope, set it down, picked it up again. He even opened the front door at one point and stood in the rain for 10 minutes, like maybe the water could wash away what he already suspected. By morning, the envelope was opened. I found him at the dining table, hunched over, eyes bloodshot, reading the documents like they were written in a language he couldn't understand. "What is this?" he asked, his voice cracked. "Proof," I said, pouring my coffee. "Florence, what did you do?" "I protected the life you tried to sell." He blinked, lips parting as if he might beg, but instead, he reached for his phone. His hands shook. "Jennifer," he said when she answered. "Hey, babe, there's a hiccup with the house. Just a paperwork issue. Nothing serious." I didn't turn. I sipped my coffee. The quiet was sweeter than sugar. Her voice came through so clearly, I could hear it from across the room. "You said the house was yours," she screamed. "You said we could move in by December. You told the kids. You told me. I quit my job for this. I turned down everything to be with you." "I'll fix it," Matthew said quickly. "It's just a delay." "You lied to me," she spat, and hung up. Matthew collapsed into the chair like his spine had given out. That's when I stood up, walked past him without a glance, and went upstairs to fold my laundry. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. On Monday, Jennifer left town. Emma saw her loading bags into a rental SUV with 3 crying children. Matthew stood on the curb, watching, helpless. "She didn't even say goodbye to him," Emma told me quietly. "She was crying so much, Mom." I didn't feel bad for her, but I still. "You're kind," I said. "But kindness doesn't mean you need to fix someone else's mess." Within 2 weeks, Matthew's company cut him loose. Officially, it was part of a restructuring. Unofficially, his misuse of corporate funds for personal trips and expenses with Jennifer had finally caught up to him. When you spend thousands on a life that isn't yours, it eventually costs you the one you had. His car was repossessed. His name was quietly blacklisted from other firms in the industry. He moved into a one-room studio with peeling wallpaper and no parking space. It was on the west side, the same side he once mocked as depressing and beneath us. The Rolex he flaunted was gone. The housewarming gifts he'd bought Jennifer? Useless. Emma and Lucas both stopped answering his calls. The man who once controlled every room he entered now sat alone in his rented apartment, ghosted by the children who once adored him. Emma replied to his long apology text with 3 words, "Ask Mom instead." Lucas finally picked up the 4th time Matthew called. "I just want to explain," Matthew said. "You don't have to," Lucas replied. "You chose them over us. Don't try to act like you didn't. I made a mistake." "No," Lucas cut in. "You made a choice. Big difference. I never told them what to say. I didn't need to. They saw everything. They felt everything. The betrayal hadn't only happened to me. It happened to all of us." And Matthew? He had burned every bridge without bothering to look behind him. Now all he could do was watch the smoke rise. I didn't expect peace to be so quiet. There were no fireworks the day I reclaimed my life. No dramatic music. Just the soft hum of the dishwasher, the warm scent of cinnamon still lingering from Thanksgiving, and the envelope now opened, emptied, and irrevocable. I had taken back what was mine. Not with rage, but with precision. In January, I stood in the middle of the living room, paint roller in hand, surrounded by empty walls and fresh possibility. The same space Matthew used to clutter with his presence was now filled with light. I repainted the walls a soft olive gray. Bought myself a vintage armchair. Installed shelves that held books I hadn't read in years, ones that used to gather dust because I was always too busy. Busy serving. Busy smoothing things over. Busy surviving. Not anymore. I didn't hire anyone for the renovation. No contractors. No designers. Just me, a pair of rubber gloves, and enough grit to make every room my own again. I took down the framed family portraits that felt like lies. In their place, I hung abstract art I bought from a local shop, pieces full of color and chaos, just like the truth. I converted Matthew's former office into a reading nook. I called it the room where I breathe. Not the study. Not the office. Just space for me. One Saturday, Lucas came over unexpectedly. He walked in, stopped cold in the middle of the room, and slowly turned around. "Mom," he said. "You changed everything." I smiled without stopping my brushstroke. I think it's time this house reflected the person actually living in it. He didn't press. He just smiled back. And for the first time in a long while, I saw that he saw me, not just as his mother, not just as the woman Matthew hurt, but as someone new. Whole. Emma called every few days from Portland, where she'd landed an internship at a landscape design firm. Every call began with, "You won't believe what I learned today," and ended with, "I miss you so much." One night she said, "You showed me something. That women don't have to stay in something just because they built it. They can build something new." I knew then that she would never settle. Not for less love. Not for half respect. And that meant everything. I didn't go back to work right away. For the first time since my 20s, I took 2 full months off. No routines. No alarms. No need to pretend to be okay when I wasn't. Instead, I volunteered at a women's support center. I helped women navigate court documents, find their voices again, and sometimes just sit in silence while they cried. I didn't tell them my full story. I didn't need to. They saw the calm in me, and it gave them hope. Gregory Palmer, my lawyer, started calling every Friday. At first, it was just updates about the house or the final filing. Then it became coffee. Then slow walks. Then something gentler. He never asked about Matthew. He never tried to fix me. He just asked simple things, like "What book are you reading?" or "Did the lavender take root yet?" One morning in March, we sat at the corner cafe, and he looked at me across the table. "You've changed," he said. "I don't like the word changed," I replied. "I didn't become someone new. I just stopped shrinking." And it was true. I hadn't reinvented myself. I had simply stepped back into who I was before the weight of his betrayal. That spring, I planted a full garden in the backyard, wild daisies, lavender, even cherry tomatoes. Every morning, I would water them while sipping coffee, feeling the sun warm the top of my head. I didn't think about Matthew. I didn't need to. But one day, his name popped up on my phone. "Matthew, do not answer." I almost let it ring. But a strange curiosity whispered through me. I answered. His voice came low and rough. "Nora," it was the first time he'd called me by my real name in months. "I know I shouldn't call. But I need to see the kids." I didn't say anything. I want to make things right. I know I destroyed everything, but if there's any chance, even the smallest, that they'd hear me out, please. I looked at the sky. A few birds floated lazily across the soft blue, and the breeze smelled of peppermint and new soil. "Matthew," I said slowly, "Emma and Lucas aren't children anymore. You can't bribe or guilt them into anything. They saw what happened. They felt it all. It's not my job to convince them." He was silent. "Please, just tell them I'm trying," he said. I hung up without answering. 3 days later, Lucas called. "Mom, Dad texted me," he said. "What are you going to do?" "I already did," he said. I told him straight. He walked out. He doesn't get to come back like nothing happened. I don't need an explanation. I needed a father, and he wasn't there. I swallowed hard. "I'm proud of you." He didn't say anything. But I heard his breath, slow and steady. And I knew those words had landed somewhere deep in his chest. Emma responded to Matthew with a single message. "When you watched Mom fall, you didn't come back to pull her up. So don't pretend to care now that she's standing." I never asked them to say those things. I never weaponized them. But children see more than we think. And pain leaves marks, some in silence, some in strength. I later heard from a woman at the support center that Matthew had been spotted waiting in line at a discount store on the south side. She said he looked tired. Thin. A little lost. He looked at me like he recognized me, she said. But then he turned away. I didn't feel smug. Just still. These days, I wake up early to the sound of birds and the scent of lavender. I water my garden. I meet Gregory for coffee. I laugh, not because everything is perfect, but because I'm no longer carrying someone else's shame. I never went looking for revenge. I just wanted peace. And somehow, I found it in the exact place he tried to take away from me. My home. April brought warmth, not just in the air, but in my bones. The lavender in my garden had finally bloomed, releasing its gentle scent with every breeze. I would sit on the porch each morning, wrapped in a light shawl, sipping coffee from a mug Emma had gifted me last Christmas. It read, "Choose you." I was finally doing that. Choosing me. One morning, as I planted marigolds near the fence, a delivery truck pulled up in front of the house. A man stepped out, handed me a thick registered envelope, and said, "Sign here, ma'am." It was from the court. Matthew had officially filed for divorce. There was no anger in my chest. No tremble in my fingers. I brought the envelope inside, set it on the dining table, poured myself a glass of wine, and played an old jazz record I used to love. The saxophone danced through the room while I flipped through the documents, every signature line like a punctuation mark at the end of a chapter one had already stopped reading. I filled in my name, Florence Nora Ellis. My name. Not his. After signing, I tucked the papers back into their envelope and left them on the edge of the table, right next to a vase of fresh lilacs. That night, I slept peacefully, as if the earth beneath me had shifted into place. Over the next few weeks, I replanted the backyard garden Matthew once called a waste of time. He used to mock the idea of gardening, said it was something people did when they had nothing better to do. But to me, each seed I buried was a memory rewritten, a hurt laid to rest beneath new life. The tomatoes were thriving. The lavender had taken root. Even the stubborn daisies danced in the wind like they had always belonged there. One afternoon, while planting basil near the porch, my phone buzzed again. It was Matthew. Again. His number had stayed in my phone only because I believed cutting someone off completely gave them too much power. Sometimes, it's more satisfying to watch them slowly fade out of relevance. I stared at the screen. For the second time, I picked up. "Hello?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Florence. Don't say my name like it still belongs to you." He paused. I heard a shaky breath. I just wanted to apologize. Not for anything in particular. Just for all of it. I didn't answer. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he added. "I know I don't deserve that. I just needed you to know I regret everything." "I know," I said quietly. "I could hear it in your silence months ago. Long before you ever admitted it." He sniffed like he might cry, but I didn't flinch. "Is there anything I can do to fix what I broke?" I stood in the middle of my kitchen, bathed in late afternoon sun, surrounded by the gentle hum of a home that had healed without him. "No," I said softly. "There isn't. Some things don't need fixing. They need letting go." There was a long pause. "Take care of yourself, Florence," he said. "You too," I replied, then hung up before he could ruin the goodbye. That night, I made lemon herb chicken and set the table for myself. Just one plate, one glass, one candle flickering in the quiet. It felt full. Lucas visited a week later. He brought me flowers, sunflowers, my favorite, and held them out with a sheepish smile. "Thought the house could use a little more yellow." "It's already full of light," I teased, but I took them and placed them in a tall glass vase. We sat on the porch, watching the sky turn gold. Do you think you'll ever, fall in love again? He asked gently. I looked out across the yard. The wildflowers Emma had helped me plant were finally blooming. Somewhere a bird chirped. The wind was light, soft, unbothered. I don't know, I said truthfully. But I'm finally in love with my life. That's a start. He nodded, and I could tell he understood. Maybe he always had. In May, Emma came home for a surprise visit. She ran into the house barefoot, still smelling like airport coffee and lavender lotion. She gasped when she saw the garden, the walls, the photos, all new, all mine. Mom, she whispered. You made it beautiful. No, I smiled, hugging her tightly. We did. That weekend, we threw a small garden party. No occasion. No grand reason. Just good food, sunlight, and the sound of laughter. Neighbors stopped by. Friends from the Women's Center brought homemade bread and stories of their own turning points. Gregory came, too. He brought a bottle of wine and stood beside me as the string lights flickered to life above the patio. He didn't say much that night. But later, after everyone left and we were washing dishes together in the kitchen, he looked at me and said, You didn't just survive, Florence. You rebuilt. I smiled softly. I didn't want to rebuild. I wanted to return. To myself. And I had. That house, once held hostage by betrayal, now stood tall in love. Not the kind that depends on someone else's presence, but the kind that blooms quietly in the soil of your own spirit. And that? That was the real victory. Summer settled into Chicago like a sigh of relief. The kind of warmth that sinks into your skin and makes you forget how cold things used to be. I found myself waking up with sunlight streaming through the curtains I had picked myself, not neutral beige or sterile white like Matthew used to prefer, but soft amber, a color that felt like hope. Emma was staying with me for a few weeks, helping me reorganize the attic and replant the front walkway. One afternoon, while pulling weeds, she looked over and said, Mom, have you ever thought about writing it all down? I paused. Writing what down? This. Everything you've been through. I think people need to hear it. I gave her a small smile. You think anyone would care? She dropped the spade and looked at me, her face suddenly serious. Are you kidding? You're the reason I'll never settle. You're why I won't stay quiet just because someone's polite. If I ever have a daughter, I want her to know women don't have to stay behind. They can walk out. They can start over. I felt tears rise, not the kind born from sadness, but the kind that come when you realize the pain you carried built something stronger in someone else. That night, I sat by the window with a notebook and a glass of wine. I didn't write the whole story. Not yet. But I did jot down a single sentence. He left the home I built, and I stayed to rebuild myself. In late July, a woman from the support center approached me after one of our sessions. You're Florence, right? She asked. Yes, I nodded. I think I used to work near your ex-husband. I saw him recently. He was walking into a temp agency. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. He looked different, she added. Tired. Like someone trying to recognize himself. I nodded again and simply said, Some people only grow after the fall. That was the last time I heard anything about Matthew for a while. He had vanished from my life not in one grand explosion, but in pieces. Texts unanswered. Emails ignored. Space claimed inch by inch until there was no doorway left for him to return through. One day in August, while watering the basil, I got a knock on the door. It was a delivery driver. He handed me a small brown package. No return address. Inside, I found a thin leather journal. Tucked between the pages was a note in shaky handwriting. Florence. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. But I wanted you to know I've been sober for 60 days. I'm in counseling. I'm working a job that doesn't pay much, but I show up every day. I see now. You didn't destroy me. I did. And you saved yourself. I hope you find everything I couldn't give you. Matthew. I stared at the note for a long time. Then, slowly, I tore it in half and dropped it in the recycling bin. Not out of hatred, but because I didn't need it anymore. His apology didn't change the past. It didn't undo what he did. And it didn't hold power over me now. My closure had never depended on his regret. That evening, Gregory joined us for dinner. Emma grilled lemon garlic salmon while Lucas, now freshly promoted and visiting for the weekend, set the table. We ate under the patio lights, our laughter floating into the trees above like little lanterns. At one point, Gregory leaned toward me and said, "You look like someone who finally belongs in her own story." And I did. I belonged to the life I'd fought for. Not just with legal papers or spreadsheets or private tears, but with resilience. Quiet, daily resilience. The kind that makes people whisper, "How did she survive that?" And then realize they'd underestimated her all along. After dessert, Emma handed me a gift. Wrapped in tissue paper was a necklace with a small charm shaped like a door. "It's because you closed one," she said. "And opened your own." That night, I stood in my bedroom looking at my reflection, bare face, loose braid, the charm resting just above my collarbone. I thought of the woman I used to be. The one who begged for scraps of attention. The one who watered herself down so someone else could shine. I barely recognized her anymore. Not because she was weak, but because she had finally laid her burdens down and walked free. September arrived dressed in golden leaves and cool wind, brushing against the porch like an old friend. I stood outside in my garden one morning, coffee warming my hands, the scent of rosemary and earth thick in the air. There was nothing extraordinary about the moment, except that it was mine. No phone calls to worry over. No lies to decode. No man sulking in the background, sucking the joy out of silence. Just peace. Finally, peace. Emma had returned to Portland. Lucas was back in Austin, chasing new goals and sending me photos of his team's success. Gregory still called every Friday, though now it was less about check-ins and more about sharing little pieces of our lives. Sometimes we met at the farmer's market. Sometimes he'd bring me fresh peaches just because they reminded him of the ones we ate during our first garden party. But romance wasn't my goal. Clarity was. Freedom was. And I had both. One afternoon, while sorting old papers in the upstairs office-turned-reading nook, I found an unopened envelope from our old joint bank. I almost tossed it, assuming it was an outdated statement, but something told me to open it. Inside was a notice of account closure. Matthew had finally closed the last shared bank account. No message. No explanation. Just a sterile confirmation that the last financial thread connecting us had been snipped. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Not relief. Not regret. Just finality. That night, I took a long bath, lit a lavender candle, and replayed the entire past year in my mind, every sleepless night, every email to my lawyer, every quiet conversation with my children, every garden seed I buried in the dirt hoping something better would grow. And it had. Better had bloomed. 2 weeks later, I hosted a small gathering at my home, just close friends from the support center, some neighbors, Emma visiting again, Lucas flying in for the weekend. We didn't celebrate anything in particular. No birthdays. No anniversaries. Just life. Just healing. As the sun dipped behind the trees and the string lights bathed the yard in soft amber, I stood up, glass in hand. Everyone quieted as I raised my voice. I spent a lot of years believing that strength meant staying. That love meant forgiving everything. That silence was dignity. But it wasn't. Not for me. Strength is knowing when to leave the table. Love is choosing yourself when no one else will. And dignity? I smiled. Dignity is walking away, quietly, completely, and never turning around. They clapped. Some cried. Lucas hugged me tighter than he had in years. Emma whispered, "That was the most powerful thing I've ever heard you say." I wasn't performing. I was just telling the truth. After the guests left and the candles burned low, I stood alone on the porch, feeling the night settle gently around me. I looked out at the garden, once a battleground, now a sanctuary, and finally understood. This story was never about revenge. It was about reclamation. Matthew lost more than a house. He lost a family, a future, a woman who once would have walked through fire for him. And in trying to build a life on top of someone else's, he burned down his own. People ask me if I'm angry. No. I'm alive. And he's just a shadow that forgot its source of light. Sometimes I still hear things. That he's moved again. That Jennifer never forgave him. That he's working night shifts at a warehouse. That his smile doesn't quite reach his eyes anymore. But that's not my concern. My story doesn't end with his ruin. It ends with my rising. Now, when I open the front door each morning, I breathe deeply. The sun spills across the floor, warm and unashamed. I sit in my reading nook, feet tucked under me, sipping tea and watching the world spin onward, without fear, without apology. One afternoon, Gregory showed up with 2 cappuccinos and a copy of a book I mentioned in passing. "I saw it and thought of you," he said. We didn't label what we were. We didn't rush. But when he reached for my hand and held it gently between his, I didn't flinch. I smiled. Because I finally understood. The best kind of love is the one you don't need to beg for. The kind that finds you after you've already found yourself. Thank you for watching Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge. If Florence's journey moved you, share this with someone who needs to know. Speech balloon: you are allowed to walk away from what breaks you. You are allowed to start again, and make it beautiful. Subscribe for more true-to-life stories of strength, betrayal, healing, and redemption. And let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Florence's shoes?